solve the equation by completing the square. We have here a polynomial equation, x squared minus 2x equals negative 13. Before we knew about completing the square, our only course of option would be to go ahead and add 13 to both sides, and then we'd have this x squared minus 2x plus 13 equals 0, and then we would try and factor this thing. That's not going to work very well, because if this were to factor, we need to find two factors of 13 to add it up to negative 2. Good luck. You're not going to find them. So it's a good thing we have this other method, this completing the square method. This completing the square method is all about trying to rewrite things so it's in the form x plus or minus some number, x plus or minus, let's say a squared equals some other number. If I can get this thing rewritten in that form, solving is easy, because I would go ahead and take a square root. So I'd have x plus a equals plus or minus the square root of b. And then I'd subtract a from both sides. And now I have x equals, and I have my answer. X equals negative a plus or minus the square root of b. All right. So the hard part, or the only part left to do, is figure out what a is and what b is. And that's where this whole completing the square process comes in. To complete the square, what we want to do is take any old polynomial, x squared plus some coefficient times x, and I want to find an appropriate thing to add to it so that the result is equal to this x plus a squared bit. Okay. If you'll remember, the appropriate thing to add is to take a look at this coefficient in front of our x term, take half of it, and square it. That's what I want to add to both sides. When I do that, I'm able to write my polynomial that way. So let's do that here. I'm going to look at the coefficient in front of my x term, this negative 2, and I'm going to take half of that, and I'm going to square it, and I'm going to add it to both sides of my equation. I have to add it to both sides because it's an equation. I don't want to change one side and not change the other. Right? So I have to, if I change the left, which I want to do so that I can factor it into this form, I'm going to have to change the right side of the equation the same way. So I take half of negative 2. So negative 2, take half of it, I square it, and I add it to the left-hand side. I'm also going to take negative 2, take half of it, square it, and add that to the right-hand side. So we get this. Now on the left, this is a perfect square polynomial, right? I have x squared, I have this negative 2 over 2 squared, negative 1, right? Negative 1 squared. And then here I have negative 2 times 1 times x. So this is a perfect square polynomial, perfect square trinomial, and I can factor it as x minus 1 whole thing squared. And that's equal to negative 13 plus minus 2 over 2 is negative 1. Negative 1 squared is 1. So this is negative 13 plus 1. That is negative 12. Now I know I'm in this form. I know how to solve it. I take a square root of both sides. So I get x minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 12, which we know that the square root of a negative number can be written as, pull that negative sign out from underneath the square root, it turns into an I, and we're left with a 12 underneath there. Let's add 1 to both sides, and then we have x equals 1 plus or minus I times the square root of 12. We could leave things that way, or we could go a little bit further. 12 is 4 times 3, and 4 is 2 squared, so we could pull a 2 out from there if you wanted to. So we could write this as 1 plus or minus I times 2 times square root of 3. And that's about all we could do. Of course, we want to recognize that 1 plus or minus something really is giving us 2 solutions. We have x equals 1 plus 2 times I times square root of 3. And then we also have x equals 1 minus 2 times I times the square root of 3. So here are our 2 answers. Alternatively, right, we could have written them that way. The part where some people mess up when they transcribe these plus or minuses is instead of just affecting this subtraction or addition here, they go ahead and make the whole statement negative or positive. All we're doing is changing this positive sign to a subtraction or subtraction to a positive, just making that one little change.